Welcome back to Absurdum, everybody. It has been a really long time since we've made a podcast, but we say that at the beginning of every podcast. So if you're binging these, welcome back from 5 seconds ago. Today we've got a pretty special episode. No Alex today, which is what makes it special. No, just kidding, Alex. If you ever get a chance to check this out,
You're the greatest monster in human history.
Today we are talking about an issue near and dear to my heart, but probably not that relevant to many people. I'm going to probably have to edit this part. We are talking about Superman and Clark Kent and what makes them, either of them, a good character. So, got a special guest today, Michael McKenna. Hello.
Hello.
Should I edit that part out? Let's start over.
What? Why? This is great.
All right. I'm going to edit
You've managed to channel your inner, shock jock. It's great.
Dude,
Coming up right after the break, we've got Superman.
Yeah. All right. So a little bit of context here, everybody. Superman's a character who has been kind of falling out of favor.
I legitimately thought you were going to describe who Superman was, for the ground up, and I'm like, no.
No, his
I appreciate that you're thorough, but
yeah. His Wikipedia page is longer than Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
more books.
Yeah, but not the book. Yeah, no, Superman's a character who's been falling out of favor in Hollywood lately, and it's something that's been perturbing me. I'm a huge Superman fan. I've read pretty much every comic up until the early 2000s. I've watched almost every form of media with him in it. And obviously Superman is 75-year-old, spanning every form ever. He's on T-shirts. He's everywhere.
T-shirts, hats, coins, shrimp.
And yeah, we wanted to talk about why he's falling out of favor, why that is really doing that character an injustice, and why it's actually important to talk about. So yeah, long-winded, gratuitous, verbose, but that's why we're here.
How unusual.
Yeah. So Mike, maybe you could start just by talking a little bit about why you volunteered to talk about this topic, other than me asking you.
All right, so Superman is a terrible character. And it's really important that people understand that. Just garbage. Just awful. However, Clark Kent is a rad, badass motherfucker, and I feel like not enough people understand that nobody should be writing Superman comics or movies or TV shows or anything. That's just foolish on its face. What you should be writing is Clark Kent stuff.
That's an interesting take on it. I don't think I've ever seen any, except for maybe a couple of comic runs, I don't think I've ever seen any form of media entitled Clark Kent. Kent 2, Clarkening.
The Clark Harder. No, but not, you missed my point, sir. No, the Superman is a character that Clark Kent puts on, right? And when you start from a Snyderian perspective of, oh, I'm Super Jesus from space, instead of, oh, I'm just a guy that wants to help people, it fucks up your whole system.
This is really interesting. So we're going to circle back to that. Let's give a little bit more context as to why we feel Superman's falling out of favor. Well, Exhibit A, Man of Steel. Exhibit B, Batman versus Superman. But if you're someone who either hasn't seen those movies or really likes them and isn't really sure what our point is, the shortest version is that those two movies really went in an opposite direction of what the character has been for the longest time. And the main argument for doing that is for doing something new and different and fresh.
And there's absolutely no problem with deconstructing a character and making a new perspective. However, you have to construct a character yourself before you can deconstruct your character. So just going whole hog into the deep end off the bat, not good filmmaking.
Yeah, I feel. I mean, everything. If you're talking about any kind of superhero stuff, it often, that rule of the internet where any argument's going to eventually talk about a certain dictator. I feel like any superhero argument is going to circle back to Batman, and specifically the Christopher Nolan films. And I feel like those offered something new and fresh, which was basically, hey, what if Batman was real and not just, like not larger than life really, like, and showed the whole origins and showing, everything in those movies is explained. Oh, how can you glide? Not just he's Batman, but an electronic suit can like do that. But yeah, that none of that work was really done in Man of Steel.
No.
Pop quiz. What is Clark Kent like? What does he like in Man of Steel? What are things that he likes?
Bathtub sex.
Lois Lane. His mom.
Yep. There's something.
That's it.
There's got to be.
I don't know.
He likes crime exposés, but not football.
Yeah, I guess, right? So, and this really comes to the problem. It's not just the Snyder films, although they are pretty big examples right now. As you said, I think a lot of the times writers, creative teams, they miss the mark. They focus too much on the spectacle of Superman and not on the character of Clark Kent.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, alliteration.
Oh ho! Apparently you should be writing comics 60 years ago.
Yeah. Bob Barker. Anyway. So.
He's my favorite comic book hero.
Yeah. I meant to say Peter Parker.
Yeah, but Bob Barker as, Neuter Man.
Anyway.
Go ahead.
So, where should we go from here? Should we talk a little bit more about what's gone wrong or what should be done right?
I mean, I feel like everybody knows what's gone wrong. Like, we're angry nerds that, like, you didn't do my thing the way I wanted. And, we're just right. That's all.
Yeah.
Just a big difference. No, I feel like...
Unsubscribed.
Yeah. We can probably move on to what we would like to see instead.
Should we talk about why it's important, or should we save that for...
Nah, we'll wrap up with that.
All right. So, how to do, I guess, Clark Kent right.
Well, the first thing you got to do is you have to make him just good. Like, imagine a young Mr. Rogers, and you've got the bones of a Clark Kent.
Yeah, but if he's so good, he's not relatable because people aren't like that.
Mr. Rogers fucking is.
He's not with us anymore.
Mr. Rogers isn't a real person.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah. So that's one of the biggest complaints that people have is they're like, oh, he's a Boy Scout. I can't relate to him because I have flaws and he has none. So how would you address that concern?
I mean, that's fine. He's not like, he's a space god. He's never going to be accurately relatable. And B, he does have flaws. They're just not ones that, you would normally associate with that kind of a character. He cares too much. And that can suck for him.
How so?
Well, he can't save everybody. But he can. He doesn't. And that's hard. Having to deal with the mental anguish and the burden of, like, power, that's an interesting problem. That you can get 20 or 30 years of comics out of. And we have.
Yeah, so, and that's the thing, is because a lot of the focus is often on Superman, the stories revolve around larger than life threats, the weaknesses revolve around
rocks
and magic and whatever. And I feel that the only Venn diagram loose connection with the vulnerabilities you're talking about is just, oh, Lois is in trouble. Gotta save her, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, I get it. Like, everyone knows Superman loves Lois Lane. But also, like, he genuinely loves people. Like, he'd go out of his way to help anybody.
Yeah. And to beat up on the Zack Snyder films a little bit, I mean, even when he is saving lives in those movies, he's just got this frowning, unenthusiastic face.
He's so disappointed to have to save people.
You look at it's hard for Superman stuff. One of the most definitive examples is the original movie, the 1978, I believe, Richard Donner film, Christopher Reeve. I mean, he saves cats from trees. He does like tiny things, and he smiles the whole time. He's happy. He enjoys what he's doing. He realizes that he has power and he can use it.
Yes.
And Man of Steel doesn't do any of that. He saves a busload of kids, and the first thing his dad tells him is, yeah, maybe you should have let him drown so you could save your identity, because people are pretty bad.
Yeah, like, what a way to screw up a kid. Like, oh, don't forget, you're more important than literally everyone else, and they can die, and it's fine.
Like, usually they approach that with, like, you have to be careful, you know, and it's the careful application of your power kind of usually thematically combines with, like, you can't use your power, you can't abuse your power. There's like, it's like saying the same thing but at opposite ends of the spectrum. Be careful, but also be careful. Like, don't become space god.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this happens a lot where it's just focusing on his strength and on his speed and his power, and there's little talk about what to do with it. And you're right. The fact that he cares about people is usually lost. And ironically, I think it's something that would be harder initially for an audience to cling on to today, but would be really refreshing, and people would gravitate to it more strongly today than maybe before. Like, if you watch the original movie with him, I mean, the whole thematic point of that movie is farmland is good and people are nice and friendly. City is full of cynical people. That's what Lois Lane is. She's a cynic. In a way, like, she's got the whole New York kind of cynical vibe, but she's also caring about people on the ground level. It's kind of a weird combination. And the whole point of that movie is Superman going...
Well, she's a cynic, not a nihilist.
Yeah. The whole point of that, thematically, is just Superman being like, no, I care about people. I want to help. And everyone going, why? Why would you hold the door open for that person? Like, it's all about me. I'm getting ahead. Screw everyone else. And that would be something that I think today, yeah, some audiences may be like, oh, that's totally, I can't relate to that, but also, oh my god, this is so refreshing. I haven't seen this in a while.
In 40 years.
Well, just the way that media is today, Batman going on killing sprees, Robin's killing everyone left and right, if you paid attention to any of the Titans, you know, all the new media for superheroes, you know, is getting dark. And grim, and everything's serious and bad.
And the idea is that, yeah, Superman's a Boy Scout, but that's fine. Everything else can be terrible. But, yeah, it's important to have a point of reference.
So, bouncing back and forth on these ideas, you're probably thinking, but there already exists a character that is doing all these things. And that is, of course, Captain America.
X-Men. Oh!
No. Yeah, not recently, anyway.
No, definitely not.
No, Captain America. So, here's a character. I'm going to put a couple of videos down below that say a lot of what we're saying in a shorter format if you're interested. But Captain America, on the surface, is hard to relate to. He's completely out of our time. Out of his depth. He's got the same kind of superhuman, unrelatable qualities as Superman, and also the Boy Scout aspects of Superman. And yet he's one of the most beloved Marvel Cinematic Universe characters right now.
Specifically because he's a counterpoint to, well, modern Superman.
Yeah, Iron Man in his, like, kind of cynical context.
It's nice to see someone that is positive.
Yeah. And you can do positive, but still human. And you can do, you know, a paragon of virtue with weaknesses.
I really feel like it definitely does come back to the original point that, like, Captain America isn't a Captain America movie. It's a Steve Rogers movie that features Captain America. Yeah,
I mean, half of the first Avenger movie is him saying, like, I want to help. I want to stand up to bullies. I want to serve. A beautiful sound you're listening to in the background is a dog drinking.
No, you gotta leave it for the mystery.
No, he'll hydrate.
Let them guess in the comments.
Yeah, well, you can guess a few of these as this canine moves around. So, yes. I mean, if we look at The Winter Soldier, for example, that movie really clashes the old timiness of Steve Rogers with the new post
Cold War.
Post Cold War mentality. And I love how they, even tiny bits of his mannerisms, you know, He's telling people not to use harsh language. He's telling people to get their foot off the dash when they're driving. Like, it's these, he's a polite person. And that's just a character trait that is usually written into Superman, but hasn't been in the last little while. I mean, Superman is the guy who literally will pick up a piece of trash on the ground while he's going to save someone else because he can. Because he goes out of his way to uphold certain, protocol and being polite and being nice and spreading positivity and so many other characters just don't care about that at all.
And that's fine, but like if you're gonna do a Superman piece of media, then why would you not want to do a Superman piece of media? Like what? Why would you want to do Batman but in blue?
Yeah. So another very relevant example. I just beat the Spider-Man video game on PlayStation. Very fortunate that I had some time, and I played through that. And
big ups to Insomniac Games for producing another incredible piece of entertainment.
We're not sponsored by them, by the way, although if they want to give us money, fine. But the reason we bring it up is because here's a video game that, it takes you through like the superhero story. You battle supervillains, but so much of the game is focused on the secret identity and also on caring for people.
Yeah, I would say it's not even the secret identity because that doesn't come up. The idea that he's trying to hide himself, except for maybe like 10 seconds when he gets hospitalized.
Yeah.
But spoilers. But it focuses on Peter Parker just doing Peter Parker things, but with super strength. Yeah. And the texting scene is something that we bring up a lot here. There's one particular cutscene about maybe 3/4 of the way through the game. Peter Parker and Mary Jane are trying to work together after encountering some relationship difficulties, and they are texting each other while Spider-Man is swinging and jumping through New York City, and you just watch their miscommunication and his frustration and his desire to be positive play out on screen, and it's adorable. It's incredibly adorable, and it's punctuated with this fantastic footage of him doing fantastic things.
Yeah, and if we look at we want to say something positive about the Snyder films, probably the best, one of the most Clark Kent as a character moments is when he and Lois Lane are talking and she's taking a bath and he just climbs into the bathtub with her, fully dressed, and it's this like kind of lovey, nice scene where you realize that he's a person and he has feelings and he's playful and he just wants to to cheer her up, and it sounds silly, but the fact is, we've been saying it a lot, is that the media that focuses on these characters needs to remember that they are characters first. They are super characters later.
And interestingly, I want to point out the not to shit on Zach more, but the reason that Insomniac does that exact thing better with the texting scene is it's Peter Parker interacting with Mary Jane, but we're watching Spider-Man. He's doing Spider-Man shit. When there's the Clark Kent bathtub scene, like, you could put that in literally any movie.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
And I think it's really fantastic, and I was so thrilled to see that. But yeah, you need to then carry that through into Big Blue.
Yeah. One of the... As campy and as not great as it was, the Lois and Clark TV show from the 90s had one pearl of wisdom.
What do you mean not great?
Well, I love it a lot, but you try to watch it now and it's like, oh, I remember how bad TV was then.
Cringe Town.
But at one moment, Clark Kent says, Clark Kent is who I am. Superman is what I can do. And that's the thing. You see in Kill Bill, he analyzes Clark Kent. He feels Clark Kent is the costume, and Superman is who he is. And I think that analysis is interesting and entirely false.
Mm-hmm.
Clark Kent is the person. Yeah, he may have been born as Kal-El, but he has lived, before he developed most of his powers, he's just a kid. He's just a person living on a farm. And he is at his best when he carries those ideals and that, humanity into even the most insane, super heroic of situations. Especially so. Saving someone's life and then saying, well, statistically, it's still the safest way to travel, or just being kind even when you're telling your assailants, like, maybe you should turn yourselves in, criminals. I mean, look at Steve Rogers in an elevator fighting a bunch of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, if you haven't seen Winter Soldier, and first thing he says is, before we get started, does anyone want to get out? And it's a bit of an intimidation factor, but it's also, no, I will fight you all if you stay here. He's polite.
But I want you to have the opportunity to not get your skull caved in.
Yeah. So, all right, let's circle around to how we would do it, because apparently we know so much.
We are geniuses, and it's a nightmare that Hollywood hasn't recognized us yet.
So, we've gone back and forth on this. It's actually one of those topics where we have so many ideas it's hard to present them coherently. But maybe you're good at cutting to the chase, Mike. What are some things that are definite that you would, that you need, or that Clark Kent needs to be represented well, or things that you're like, God, just do this?
Well, so first of all, you need a good villain, and I don't mean like you need to pick one of the great ones. I mean, like, you need to understand what your villain is telling about your story, right? So your point about Superman 77 being about the difference between Central American wisdom and big city cynicism is absolutely true, and it's personified by their version of Lex Luthor, who sucks, but it exists to make that point. In contrast to Clark Kent there. So I don't care what weird costume you choose. You just have to make sure that that's there to tell a story about an important aspect of the reason that Clark Kent is so sweet.
Yeah, I feel like you could pick pretty much anyone or anything, and as long as you do the minimal amount of work to you're gonna. This is a very beloved character, and there are people who love different aspects of the character. So I feel like if you do the bare minimum to explain why this character is a threat to Superman, and then make the rest of it entirely, as you said, why he's a challenge, why he's an opposite, why he's a threat. And what I mean by that is, you could pick like the weakest. You could pick a normal person. I mean, look at Civil War. The villain of that story was a guy who was angry, who was on a revenge story, versus the Avengers, right?
Yeah.
So you could pick like the weakest. You could pick a normal civilian in a Superman tale, and all you would have to do there is just maybe give him a reason why he's actually a threat to Superman, but why he's a threat to Clark Kent's way of life. So,
or just people's way of life.
Yeah, or just
in relation to Clark Kent.
Yeah. So, different philosophies, different worldviews. These are what make the villains interesting. I mean, spectacle, sure, you might want a villain who can fly or do whatever, but what really has lasting power is when you have a villain who you may not agree with his viewpoint, or maybe you do, but you can see where he's coming from.
Yeah.
And it opposes what Clark Kent sees, and that's the battle that you're really engaged with. That's what lasts. It's not, oh my God, did you see that special effects that they did? It looks so great. It's, should we look out for the greater good? Should we look out for the individual? Should we look out for ourselves? What are the tactics there? Okay, so some kind of villain with a meaningful connection to the story.
Well, not even that complicated. Some kind of villain that is, like, any kind of villain, so long as you recognize that the villainous nature comes from an opposite to the goodness that is Clark Kent.
Okay, and then speaking on the goodness, how would you represent that? How would you make that in a way that doesn't come across as false, almost so generous to be disingenuous? How do you do that?
It really is just a matter of like sincerity when you're putting something on the screen or whatever your medium of choice is, like being sincere about that, having an actor that can portray that genuine nature. Because yeah, like in Superman 77, he pulls a cat out of a tree, and if it was anyone other than Christopher Reeves, I would have been like, that's bullshit. But he nails it.
Yeah, I don't see Ben Affleck or Christian Bale like pulling a cat out of a tree without immediately like putting it into a gun or something. Like, I don't know, it just doesn't work.
But
you're
my cat gun.
Yeah.
It's a cat uphold.
But yeah, so sincerity, someone who can carry that forward. What about, I don't know, the environment or the supporting environment, casting, or like not just casting, but like the characters around it? How do you, whatever media you're putting it in, how do you support what you're trying to do with people other than the protagonist and the antagonist?
You gotta be efficient with your writing, I think, and remember that your characters. I guess it depends on the kind of movie you want to make, right? But if I was making it, like, it would be a character story about Clark Kent. So all of your supporting cast just exist to pull out information for the audience, to give credence to that sincerity, to cause like strife and struggle, so that we can see how Clark Kent reacts to that. How Mr. Rogers, comes to terms with the fact that you can't save everyone.
And I think that brings us around to one of our final points, which why are we talking about this? Why is it important? Yeah, we like the character and we're really interested, but why is it important? And I'm just going to start by saying that, as I said before, I think representation of that kind of character is at an all-time low, and yet the need for it is at an all-time high. It's too damn high. But we have, the idea of a journalist fighting against people who are in power, who view journalism and the media as fake news, in a world that is seemingly more disconnected and more cynical and misinformed, that seems more relevant today than ever. And maybe that's just because I only have my own, I only exist in the now. But the idea of a journalist, an immigrant journalist,
an illegal alien,
and a caravan from Krypton.
They keep showing up, so
yeah, that seems more relevant. And I think that media, art, these things transcend entertainment value, and I think it is important to have representation of this kind of character to show a different way of thinking. So I'll just back off from there before I get into it. So Mike, why are we talking about this?
The stories that we choose to tell tell everything about the society that we live in. So when we choose to tell dark, sad, depressed, violent stories, it's pretty clear how we all feel. But also, in the face of that, you have the opportunity to tell stories that are positive, bright, and give a model to aspire to, as a means to escape that dark, dreary, depressed present that we've managed to create for ourselves. So, while exploring sadness and the horrors of life are important, every once in a while someone's got to come along and say, no, but things can be okay too. And Superman is the perfect person for that. There's no one better suited than a guy who cannot fail and will always be good.
Yeah, well, I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up. We could speak for many hours on this topic, but what do you guys think?
Tune in next week for 6 more hours.
Yeah, the extended cut. The Snyder cut. What do you guys think? Do you care? Do you like this character at all? What would you do differently? Obviously, feel free to drop any comments. Always love looking through those. And yeah, thanks so much for listening and hanging out. And we'll see you all next time. Bye now.
Goodbye. Goodbye now. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye-bye now.